Welcome to Fleet News Group podcast. I'm Caroline Fall, and today I have David Lewis from Boston, Massachusetts on the line to talk about his company MoveEV's solutions for fleets transitioning from gasoline to electric powered vehicles. Welcome, David.
Good morning, Caroline. Great to be here.
We've already talked about the weather, so you're hot and I'm freezing. Anyway, I can't help but start with a read on the US political landscape, as here we are in the wake of the close call on Republican nominee Donald Trump's life, and after growing clamour for Democratic President Joe Biden to drop out of the race, he did, endorsing Kamala Harris, his VP, to run for presidency. The big question is, for those of us championing sustainable transport and the move to greater reliance on renewable energy sources, is what are companies like yours doing to prepare for policies of Trump should he get in, and who I presume would axe pro-environmental regulations and programs? Like what would that mean for fleet electrification in the US?
So certainly tenuous situation here in the US. What I'm very happy to report is that I believe whoever is in the White House, there will be proliferation of electric vehicles in the US. The states have a lot of control over policy and net zero goals here, and around 25 of them have policies and mandates baked in for governments and commercial fleets to transition to electric vehicles. Also, both parties, Democrats and Republicans, are for creating jobs, I think, as well as lowering costs for businesses. And electric vehicles are a great way to create jobs in America and also reduce operating costs for businesses and put more money into the economy and waste less money on fuel. So the cat's out of the bag here. I think that there's a lot of rhetoric around Republican or Democrat, might be, good or bad, but there's strong arguments on both sides. And recently Tesla has come out to contribute vast sums of money to the Republican parties going forward. So I think either side is definitely going to be incentivized to keep promoting electric vehicles. And ultimately, electric vehicles are really a national security issue, as well as an economic viability issue going forward. And America has been leading the auto industry for the last 100 years, and I don't think that we're going to relinquish that lead to any other country lightly. And the move globally is to electric vehicles. And unless America wants to fall behind the rest of the world and lose leadership in the auto industry, we're going to have to continue to overinvest in the space to catch up where others are ahead. So I think it's a bright future either way.
I sort of feel like saying phew, P-H-E-W. I feel like saying phew, P-H-E-W.
Yeah, it's
really great information.
We work with all these government fleets from Georgia to Washington, Massachusetts, North Carolina, Colorado, everywhere. And they're all adopting electric vehicles. They're all having great operational outcomes and really saving a bunch of money. And, that's why it's going to win. And I think the incentives that have been in play and will be in play over the next 5 years, especially through the IRA and a bunch of state legislation, is really going to continue to move the ball forward so that we can catch up. So I'm very optimistic.
Let's get the background on your company, MoveEV. Can you tell us what you do, where you operate, and how long you've been doing it for?
Wonderful. We've been around for 4 years. We operate in the Northeast today in the US and Canada. And our focus is on sustainability and specifically helping large corporations and governments transition their fleets to electric vehicles. Where our focus is a gap in the market, which is charging at home reimbursement. And so what's happening now in America, as fleets are adopting electric vehicles, 80% of them are getting sent home to charge. And so sending them home to charge creates a new business expense for an employer and an obligation of an employee to provide the electricity. And we sit squarely in the middle there to make sure that the electricity and the funds flow freely. So our focus is on sort of eliminating this bottleneck in the market right now, which is need to send these fleets home. They're going home, but not every home is a gas station. And really, that's where all the transaction and fuel volume is now taking place. 80% of folks are fueling at home. And we offer a technology solution to create accurate business receipts so that the employee and the employer know exactly how much it costs to fill the vehicle with energy. That's our focus. We're the only accurate product in the market. And then we quickly dispense funds to the employees so they're not out of pocket very long for the electricity costs that they're fronting for their employer.
No, I'm glad you brought this up, because I think the product's called ReimburseEV that you have. And that's why I contacted you and invited you onto our podcast, just to hear more about it, because, you know, the way I understand it, the way you market it anyway, is that it's a win-win for both the fleet driver and the business they work for, that you've somehow worked out how to make at-home charging for fleet vehicles transparent. So I actually do want to hear more detail about it.
Wonderful.
About ReimburseEV.
Yeah, so it's, you know, we're new in the market. I travel around the country in Canada speaking about this. We are the first to market and the market leader right now for this. And what we do is, how you capture this accurately is a technology solution. And really, there's two pieces of information that you need to put together for an accurate charging at home receipt. And one of those pieces of information is, how do I measure how much energy went into the vehicle, right? And so we're hyper accurate at understanding how much energy went into the vehicle at the home. Our preferred method to do that is through vehicle-based telematics like a Geotab or a Samsara, that can now actually not only track miles, but understand how much energy is put into the vehicle when it's being charged. So that's something that we use to understand how much energy has been put into the car. And then in the US, it may be different in Australia, but in the US, everyone's utility bill and their plan is different door to door. And so what we do that's so unique is we actually look at the employee's utility bill on a monthly basis to decipher what the kilowatt cost should be for when that vehicle was charged. And it's very complicated in the US because your rate can change by time of day. It can change if you have solar. There may be an economic incentive program. And there's a lot of gray to be worked out, which is why my background as being a vehicle and charging at home reimbursement expert really comes into play here, so that we can make sure that we are reading everyone's utility bill correctly and applying the appropriate kilowatt rates to the appropriate charging session. And we're able to get down to the level of detail of, Caroline, you charged from 6:30 p.m. to 2:30 a.m. in the morning. You input in your car 35 kilowatts, right? And it cost you $3.50. And we're very transparent between the company. We make a very clear receipt for yourself, Carolyn, so you know, so you can submit it to your company so they know, and so that they can issue a tax-free, labor liability-free reimbursement. Be comfortable that it's just a fair exchange of goods.
What about the drivers? So when I was reading through, some of the documents on the product, I understand that they're responsible for the installation and ownership of the charger. So did they pay for that hardware and then get reimbursed? Like, how does that work?
Right. I wish there was. So there's no, one of my favorite quotes is, there's no right way to eat an apple. And so, like, as fleets are are rolling out these charging at home programs, they make different decisions based on their culture. And so some cultures will pay for a level 2 to be installed, pay for the charger, pay for the level 2. That's some cultures. Some cultures will say, hey, Caroline, you already have a level 2 charger at your house. We don't need to put one in. So we're not going to put in a second charger for you, right? And then a lot of fleets are just saying that, you know, if you don't drive a crazy amount, in the United States, 70 miles a day is the average fleet trip for a day. Is it the same in Australia or similar? I imagine it's similar. So there you really don't even need to install a level 2. If you're diligent about plugging into a level 1 outlet in your driveway at home, that's actually going to trickle charge your vehicle enough overnight to the tune of 50 miles an evening. And so really there isn't a need to have a level 2. And so understanding all of these things being options, then the company can make the right decision for how they want to roll out their charging at home reimbursement program. What is unique about our program is we do not rely on a smart charger to get the charging information. And we actually try to move companies away from that model, because that model is fraught with errors and drivers' dissatisfaction, because as you know, anything that needs to be online all the time isn't. And when it's not online, it doesn't track chargers. So there's a lot more human error around if you're trying to get information from a smart charger. What's great about our solution is we're able to make any charger smart by getting the information about the charging directly from the vehicle.
When you mention level 1 and level 2 chargers, are you talking about slow chargers versus fast chargers?
Yes, I'm sorry. So there's 3 levels in the US, and we kind of casually refer to them as level 1, 2, and 3. A level 1, what I mean by that is just a normal outlet, something that's going to charge 3 to 5 miles an hour if you plug it into your tank. When I describe a level 2, in my mind, that's a semi-fast charger that's going to charge around 15 to 35 miles an hour. That's a level, you know, a charger that you would install at your home to go a little bit faster, use a 240 volt, right? And then a level 3 charger is something you wouldn't have at home. It would be a supercharger that's going to be able to charge you up to potentially 100 miles an hour and up.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that, because I note in a report by you that you advocate for slow chargers where possible, and you have been sort of saying that in this conversation. But you say that like slow chargers are better for the vehicle, like they prolong battery life. They require the lowest financial outlay to get commission. So I'd just love you to talk a bit more about that and why the sort of top shelf setup, that is the networked fast charger, really in many cases is an overkill.
So it's how the market has evolved and where the money was initially. And so how fleet electrification historically has been proposed to fleets in the United States is, hey, Acme Corp, let's electrify your fleet. Which chargers would you like to buy first? Let's pick out a $1,500 level 2 charger that you might like. Then let's figure out how are we going to install this in your house. And it made logical sense at the time that the fleet would have to figure out infrastructure, but that's really because fleet managers didn't really understand the business and how and actual charging behavior, right? Because most fleet managers, even if they're rolling out electric vehicles, don't own or operate an electric vehicle in their life on a daily basis. If they do, so it was overkill. And the chargers companies, you know, there were a lot of IPOs. There's been some consolidation in the market lately, and it's becoming way more commoditized. Because what we're seeing is that as soon as you buy the technology, it becomes obsolete, right? But charging companies did a great job of saying, I need these all networked so we can aggregate all this information, and that's how we're going to understand the charging behavior of your drivers. Well, what happened a couple of years ago is that telematics companies and OEMs started showing that, hey, we're showing you the charging data right here. Hey, look at us. And actually getting the charging data from the vehicle is a better source of truth. than a charger that can be used by anyone in the neighborhood. And so when you're talking about a business expense, you want to be hyper accurate about energy going into the works vehicle, not your neighbor's vehicle. And so as we've been out talking to the market, explaining all of this to them, doing total cost of ownership math, and really showing them that actually charging slower is better for the vehicle. It's been proven, like you said, to do less harm to the battery. And it also forces overnight off-peak hour charging because it takes longer. So you can plug it in and forget it, and you naturally get the lowest cost rates. So in the US, that can be between 15 and 35 cents less than a peak rate. And so really it's behavioral. And so when you don't know anything, you may overbuy. Like this happens a lot when you're in a panic. I don't know if you remember COVID. I ended up with a lot of toilet paper in my bathtub. That didn't make any sense. Similarly here, I think that people are panicking. They're looking for solutions, and the charging companies were there to offer them. And so in my opinion, those solutions were maybe a little bit oversold, overbought. And once so it's really exciting where we are now, where people are starting to think, hey, I actually want to get this information from the vehicle. There's no real reason why this charger needs to be super smart. Well, I'm not doing anything special with it. It's all flying all the time anyways. And so why don't we either level 1, maybe we reimburse or help a little bit with installing level 2 if we see that it's an actual need, right? But what's nice about actually starting with a level 1 is I can tell you how much charge they started the day with, how much they're driving around, and do they actually need a level 2, right? But sometimes they do in certain circumstances where people are driving sort of more like the max amount, like 300 miles a day or 200 miles a day, they may need a charger at home, but most folks don't.
So you mentioned telematics is sort of integral to use your product. Are you agnostic about telematics companies? Like I note that you mentioned Geotab, which is a sponsor of my podcast.
Oh, so I love Geotab. We have a very special relationship with Geotab. We're in their marketplace and are part of their sustainability alliance. And we are very excited about working with them because they are the best in class right now for telematics solution. They have invested first and more often, and the richness of the data that they're able to provide on the electric vehicles is just unparalleled. Any other company that is able to provide rich data, we work with, right? And our goal is to work with everybody and kind of just meet our clients where they are. But we are very impressed with Geotab, and again, it's all over their marketing. They're very sustainability first, and I think that it is differentiating right now, and we can't recommend them enough. But there are other wonderful telematics providers out there that we do work with and are more than happy to work with, and do offer good solutions.
Obviously, we're all on this education path, and I was just wondering, like, where we are now, what are the sticking points or misconceptions still holding back adoption of electric vehicles among US fleet managers?
Yeah, so a couple things. They're still known as being more expensive. So that's really interesting. I think a lot of these vehicles are a parity or below today, just on sticker price. So that's a barrier that we need to get over. And then a lot of fleet managers are very concerned about their employees and their drivers just pushing back, not wanting to change behavior, not wanting an electric vehicle. And then also this charging conundrum, right? When they're thinking, how are these things going to charge? And they're thinking, I either have to lose a lot of my day by having these people charge in public, give them some sort of, charging card, or I'm going to install a bunch of behind the fence, we call it charging, and then I got to figure out these vehicles being there. And so what is really, I think, starting to open their minds, which is great, is when the elite fleets in the space are showing such promise and success with these electric vehicles that they all talk to each other. So the fleet management industry is really tight knit here. And as the bigger players adopt and are vocal about successes that they're having, then a lot of the fleet managers will follow suit, because it's hard to be first in this space, because especially with electric vehicles, some people, some fleet managers will tell you they've been very wrong. Some fleet managers have stories about buying electric vehicles that don't even exist anymore 8 years ago, and some horror story, and it scarred them and whatever. But the reality is that, the rest of the world is approaching sort of this 20% mark, right? I mean, Norway is at selling 80+% EVs. It works, and so that's what's really exciting right now. Is a lot of companies maybe a couple of years ago talking about getting their first 5 or 10 now have got them and are ordering their next 50 or 100, because especially, and I hate to say it, but by solving this charging at home reimbursement conundrum, it really makes the rollout so much easier, because they don't have to install and wait to install and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars installing chargers on site, right? And they also don't have this conundrum in the US of, I've got a 25% attrition rate in my workforce. If I install this charger today, this man or woman may not be here later. What am I going to do with the charger? All this stuff. And so what's nice is we get to sort of cross those two problems off the list, and you don't really have to think about them. And again, that's really new, right? That really is sort of a new technology enabled as the information coming from the vehicle becomes rich and we can use it. Over the last couple of years, we've really been able, I think, to turn the market into a much clearer, less complicated pathway to scale the rollout, right? Because you think about it, when you're sampling in the beginning, it's okay if you just install some chargers at work. Oh, we got a couple, 3, 4, 5. But if you've got 1,000 vehicles in your fleet, it's impossible to install charging at work, and it will ruin your business if those vehicles charge in public. Fleet managers are focused on uptime. That's maybe where I should have started. And they're really worried about reducing their uptime with electric vehicles. And what's brilliant about charging at home is every day you start with a full tank. And so you eliminate trips to the gas station or the electric station, right? By charging at home. And so that can save, 30 minutes to an hour a week.
Amazing. I'm sold. I should have asked you about your background, like how did MoveEV, come into being?
Yeah, so really, I've been in fleet for the last 10 years. The first 5 of it was spent at what became the largest vehicle reimbursement company in the world while I was there. And so I learned all about vehicle reimbursement, which is an alternative to a fleet management program. And I learned all about fleet programs and had a really tremendous growth and success there. And then when that came to an end, it was, COVID was here. I had my second daughter and climate was happening. And I really had time to think about, what do I want to do with the next 10 years of my life? And I decided I want to work on decarbonization. And then, I walked the streets enough to figure out, wow, if I can do something with electric vehicles, that could really be special. And then, no, electric vehicles weren't happening 5 years ago. So I partnered with some folks in the UK and the Netherlands that were way ahead of us, these talented fleet consultants that teach me all about electric vehicles and electrification. And then we started working on projects together, and I got a bunch of consulting work. And then one of the largest companies and fleets in the country came to me and said, Dave, I've heard you've been studying this. I've got 200 F-150s that are about to be in my employees' homes. And I just realized I have to reimburse for charging at home. Can you please help me? And then here we are, 3 years later, and we work with a bunch of Fortune, 500 companies, a bunch of huge government fleets, and I'm really excited because this was just a huge, and still is a huge void in the market, right? That really helps to scale the rollout. And the team that I have built is just absolutely incredible. Leaders in in the fleet space, or the other side of the coin I have here. Anyway, on another call, I can tell you all about the team, but we have the fleet side covered very strongly and the reimbursement side covered very strongly. And that's why we're able to invent and grow this product, because I know reimbursement, other members of the team know fleet really well, and this really sits squarely in the middle.
Wow, it's a great story. I absolutely love it, and I'm so excited to share it with our listeners here down under. I really think we've probably nearly run out of time, but I guess just another thing I sort of wanted to tick off with you was just talking about growth in electric vehicles in the US. So here in Australia, and from a very slack start, growth in EV, new vehicle sales has finally burst into double digits, and federal and state policy settings are favourable now for continued growth. But meanwhile, I see it's been slowing in the US in recent months. So what do you attribute that to, and what is your outlook for EVs in the US, which you have touched on a couple of times, but let's just...
Yeah. So I think similarly, we're in a very similar place, I think for similar cultural reasons. I do want to separate consumer, which is growing about the same rate as it is in Australia, from fleet. Fleet is about to grow exponentially because of decarbonization mandates. In California specifically, if you have a fleet of over 100 vehicles, 25% of them have to be electric in 2025. So what's wonderful about fleet versus consumer is that I turn over 15-20% of my vehicles every year. And so once I'm feeling great about electric vehicles, specifically the electric vehicle pickup trucks that have come out this last year, now instead of ordering 5 out of 100, folks are starting to order 25 out of 100, and I expect that to get to 100. And so that's what's really exciting, because as you know, in fleet, there is a 5-year timeline every time, because that's just how we cycle vehicles here. But it's very exciting because most things are, going to pilot, and then, they proliferate. Like I remember a time where anti-lock brakes were not really a thing yet here, right? Just think about that. So yeah, I don't know. I think I'm very, very optimistic about, the signs I'm seeing in the market and where I think the fleet market is going to go. And in the US specifically, I think more so than many countries, the corporations tend to set trends. And so I'm really happy that I'm seeing the biggest and the best in the US setting the trend of electric vehicles. And I do think that it will trickle down into the consumer market.
Thanks for your time, David. It's been fantastic to talk to you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to Fleet Auto News podcast. It was edited and produced by Isabella Fiorentino. The original theme music for this podcast was created by Isabella Fiorentino. You can follow us on Spotify. Just search for Fleet Auto News. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Our website is fleetautonews.com, where you can get all our stories, videos, and podcasts. Until next time, drive safely and take care.